So, Jeff, I'm reading about perpetual motion machines. People actually used to believe that they could build a machine that could run forever on its own inertia. I guess these people never took any physics classes.
I love the concept of perpetual motion. It's like solid engineering meets a supernatural force, kind of like alchemy.
Well, it's too bad that the idea itself is so far-fetched.
That may be so, but there's a machine that was built in Lynn, Massachusetts that far eclipses the perpetual motion machine as far as audacity. The builders called their device the God Machine. Hi, I'm Jeff Belanger.
And I'm Ray Auger, and welcome to episode 31 of the New England Legends podcast. If you give us 10 minutes, we'll give you something strange to talk about today. You can subscribe to our show for free on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. Do us a favor and post a review on iTunes. It helps us a lot.
Okay, before we get into the God Machine, I want to talk a little bit more about perpetual motion.
The concept of perpetual motion goes back to the Middle Ages. It was believed that with enough pulleys and levers, some engineering know-how, and perhaps a little bit of magic, you could create a machine that once started could generate its own energy and run forever.
I think an example would help.
I agree.
There's a desk accessory that was really popular back in the 80s and even into the 1990s called a Newton's cradle.
Even if you don't recognize the name, I know you'd recognize the device. It's a set of 5 metallic balls suspended by strings, kind of like fishing wire, between 2 brackets. You pull one ball at the far end, let it go, and
that first ball hits the next ball in line and then ultimately sends the ball at the far end outward. When that ball comes back, it has the same effect, sending the first ball outward again.
This works because Sir Isaac Newton taught us about kinetic energy. The energy from the first ball is transferred into the first ball it hits, sending that energy through the ball next to that one, the next, and so on until it reaches the end and sends that last ball out and back.
The only problem is this is not a perpetual motion machine. Some energy is lost with each transfer. There's gravity pulling down on each of these balls, a tiny bit of wind resistance, and after a little while, those balls are going to lose the energy you first put into them and stop moving altogether.
The point here is that people have tried to create perpetual motion machines for centuries. It's like a cosmic puzzle that some engineers have tried to solve to create a self-sufficient machine.
This relates to the God Machine because in October of 1853, tinkerers were still thinking this might be accomplished. In fact, the tinkerers we're talking about here believed their machine would be better than perpetual motion. Their machine would become sentient.
We're talking a long time before artificial intelligence.
To set the stage for this machine, we really need to understand what's going on in the town of Lynn, Massachusetts in 1853.
Please tell me that's the year that marshmallow fluff was invented.
No, Ray, that was actually 1920, but marshmallow fluff is indeed a New England legend, maybe for another day.
Well, I'm looking forward to that one. Now, if you listen to our very first episode of the podcast, you heard us discuss Dungeon Rock in Lynn. In 1852, this is a place where Hiram Marble dug and chiseled through solid rock because spirits told him he'd find buried pirate treasure there.
Hiram Marble was a spiritualist, a person who believed he could communicate with spirits. The spiritualist movement had begun in Hydesville, New York in 1848, so this concept was still new. The town of Lynn already had a growing spiritualist community. If Hiram Marble finds gold, Lynn becomes Mecca for spiritualism.
Enter John Murray Spear. Spear is from Boston. Born in 1804, he started his career as a minister of the Universalist Church. He served the church in Barnstable, Massachusetts, as well as other New England houses of worship.
But all that changed in 1851. Reverend Spear claims during that summer he received 12 messages from his deceased father. He would go on to publish these and other spirit communications in his book, Messages from the Superior State. It's a book you can read for free in its entirety online at archive.org if you're interested.
John Murray Spear would hold public demonstrations where he'd put himself into a trance and allow spirits to communicate through him.
One of those spirits that communicated to and through Spear was another guy born in Boston about 150 years earlier, Founding Father Benjamin Franklin.
That's the dude on the $100 bill.
The very same, although there were no Franklin $100 bills in 1851. Soon, the spirit communications were getting more complicated. Spear claims to be in contact with electricizers. This is a group of spirits who are trying to benefit humankind.
I get it now. Ben Franklin, electricity. electricizers.
So Reverend Spear claims the spirits directed him to preach about ideas like the abolition of slavery, women's suffrage, and free love. The idea of sex and love between consenting people without the need for marriage.
And this is more than a century before Woodstock. How did people take his ideas on free love in 1851?
It went over like a Led Zeppelin.
I see what you did there.
I did. So Reverend Spear is pretty safely now on the outskirts of society. Between his radical social views and channeling spirits, this guy is down to only a few loyal followers. But one person who believes in him is a spiritualist named Jesse Hutchinson, who owns some property in Lynn, in the area of High Rock on a hilltop. And that's not far from Dungeon Rock. Hutchinson also owns a stone cottage on the property and offers it up to Reverend Spear. And this is where our story turns weird.
As if channeling Benjamin Franklin isn't weird enough.
Right. So these electricizers start dictating schematics and plans to Reverend Spear on how to build a very special machine. They called it the New Messiah.
And what was the New Messiah supposed to be?
This was going to be a machine unlike anything ever built before. Built by human hands, its construction directed by spirits that would come to life and become the physical savior of humankind.
Reverend Spear wasn't alone in this project. He had the team of spirits helping, of course, but in the physical world, Spear had his brother John helping him. He also had spiritual newspaper editors Reverend Hewitt and Alonzo Newton, plus a woman referred to as Mary of the New Dispensation.
Mary of the New Dispensation?
Yes.
That's a pretty good name for a band.
It is, but that's all we know about this supernatural midwife.
John Murray Spear would go into his trance and begin dictating the plans for the machine. Construction would take 9 months.
Of course it would take 9 months.
Right. And 200 spirit communication sessions to acquire all of the plans. Spear comes to believe that the living can control spirits through a kind of rudimentary battery made of copper and zinc. So he builds this electromagnetic suit of armor.
So they're building this machine over the gestational period of 9 months. And they've spent about $2,000 on this project. That's about $60,000 in today's money.
Though there's no blueprints or photographs or anything like that survive today, we did find one description of the machine from Slater Brown's book, The Heyday of Spiritualism. A witness who saw the machine described it this way.
From the center of the table rose two metallic uprights, connected at the top by a revolving steel shaft. The shaft supported a transverse steel arm, from whose extremities were suspended two large steel spheres enclosing magnets. Beneath the spheres there appeared a very curiously constructed fixture, a sort of oval platform formed of a peculiar combination of magnets and metals. Directly above this were suspended a number of zinc and copper plates, alternately arranged and said to correspond with the brain as an electric reservoir. These were supplied with lofty metallic conductors, or attractors, reaching upward to an elevated stratum of atmosphere, said to draw power directly from the atmosphere. In combination with these principal parts were adjusted various metallic bars, plates, wires, magnets, insulating substances, and peculiar chemical compounds. At certain points around the circumference of these structures, and connected with the center, small steel balls enclosing magnets were suspended.
Small steel balls enclosing magnets were suspended. Well, that sounds familiar.
After 9 months, Mary of the New Dispensation was said to be exhibiting signs of actual pregnancy, so the spirits direct her to deliver the final stage of the miracle. The due date is June 29th, 1854.
Mary lays down in front of the New Messiah machine for 2 hours and claims to go through labor pains. According to Reverend Hewitt, the newspaper editor of New Era, who was there as a witness, after 2 hours, Mary stands up, touches the machine, and then... And then
what?
The dangling magnetic balls move.
If you read his description, he couldn't oversell this event enough. He used terms like the physical savior, new creation, heaven's last gift to man, the philosopher's stone, and the new Messiah, to name a few. Other witnesses weren't his kind. The best they could offer was that a few machine parts swayed slightly once Mary touched it.
Andrew Jackson Davis, one of the most famous spiritualists of the day, comes to check out the machine for himself. His conclusion is both horribly kind and cruel. He claims that Reverend Spear lacks the intellectual capacity to build such a machine on his own. Therefore, the plans must have truly been dictated by spirits. But
because the machine doesn't actually do anything, it must have been some, quote, irresponsible entities who directed Reverend Spear, because he appears to be the butt of a cosmic prank.
no machine came to life that day, and no perpetual motion.
The machine and its plans have both been lost to time, but we didn't forget about the man who thought he could build a sentient deity from copper, zinc, and metal parts.
You know what's really scary?
What?
This makes me wonder that if in a few decades or maybe even a century from now, when we've built true artificial intelligence that figures out it's superior to humans and doesn't need us, I wonder if we'll look back to Lynn, Massachusetts in 1853 and the work of Reverend John Murray Spear and find the story not so weird anymore. Maybe this legend was our first early warning.
Ray, this episode makes me want to throw away my smartphone.
But not before you use your phone to navigate to ournewenglandlegends.com and check out the entire archive of past episodes, plus see photos related to the stories and more.
Our theme music is by John Judd, and we'd like to thank Dave Schrader from Beyond the Darkness podcast for lending his voice acting talents.
Until next time, remember, the bizarre is closer than you think.